In a packed Jefferson District court, Karoline Leavitt sat quietly, her small silver cross necklace barely visible. Judge Charles Harwin pointed at her, calling it disruptive and fining her $500. Others wore loud shirts. Untouched, she was just a young staffer, right? Then she stood, outsmarting him with the law. So why was her faith the only target? Before we dive into this story, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us hit 1,000 subscribers and keeps these inspiring stories coming. Thank you. The Jefferson District Court hummed with early morning energy, its tall windows letting in soft light that warmed the wooden benches. Karoline Leavitt, 27, slipped into a back row, her navy blazer neat, a small silver cross necklace tucked under her collar. She opened her legal pad, pen ready, her focus sharp on the religious freedom case unfolding. Sent by the White House to observe, she blended into the crowd, just another staffer doing her job. Spectators chatted, lawyers shuffled papers, and the air felt routine. Karoline's hand moved steadily, jotting notes, unaware of the judge's sharp glance. She was here to work, nothing more. But what no one in the room knew was that her quiet presence was about to spark a firestorm. The Jefferson District Court was alive with the hum of a big case. Late morning light poured through high windows, glinting off polished wooden benches where spectators sat shoulder to shoulder. Karoline Leavitt, 27, settled into a seat near the back, her navy blazer pressed, a small silver cross necklace tucked beneath her collar. Her legal pad rested on her lap, her pen scratching quick notes as lawyers sparred over a religious freedom lawsuit. She was here on White House orders. Observe, report, stay sharp. Her focus was laser-like, oblivious to the tension brewing up front. Judge Charles Harwin, 55, that stood behind the bench, his gray suit as rigid as his posture. His voice boomed, cutting through the arguments to call a recess. Papers rustled, spectators stretched, and a low chatter filled the room. Karoline kept writing, her pen moving steadily, not noticing Harwin's eyes narrow as they landed on her. He leaned forward, gavel in hand, and pointed straight at her. "You, in the back," he snapped, his voice sharp enough to silence the room. "That necklace of yours is disruptive. It's contempt of court, $500 fine." The air went still. Every head turned. Karoline's pen froze mid-sentence, her cheeks flushing with heat. The weight of dozens of eyes pressed down on her, some curious, some judging. A man 2 rows ahead, wearing a freedom cap tilted back, shook his head and muttered, "That's not right." A lawyer in a pinstripe suit, his gold watch catching the light, glanced at Karoline, then looked away, unbothered. Another spectator, sporting a red shirt with bold white letters spelling "Live Free," shifted in his seat, comfortable and ignored. Karoline's cross barely an inch long, a quiet symbol of her faith, was somehow the only problem. She stood, smoothing her blazer, her voice calm but clear. "Your Honor, may I explain my necklace?" Harwin's lips twisted into a smirk, and he waved her off. "Sit down, young lady. You've caused enough trouble." The word lady landed like a slap, reducing her to a kid in the principal's office, not the White House press secretary she was. She sat, her fingers grazing the cross, her mind racing. This wasn't just unfair, it was targeted. She'd seen the lawyer's flashy watch, the loud shirts, the oversized earrings on a woman in the front row. Why her? Why this Sarah Thompson? The court clerk stood at her desk, sorting files, but her hands paused. Her eyes darted from Harwin to Karoline, a flicker of recognition in them. She'd seen Harwin do this before, zero in on religious symbols, crosses, hijabs, while letting bigger distractions slide. James Wilson, The bailiff leaned against the wall by the door, his hand tightening on his belt, his jaw clenched. He'd watched Harwin pull this stunt too many times. The crowd's whispers grew louder, a mix of confusion and unease. A woman in a green scarf nudged her friend, saying, "That's not fair. My bracelet's louder than her necklace." Karoline's pen lay still on her pad, a faint ink smudge spreading where she'd pressed too hard. The smudge felt like a sign, a crack in the day's order. She wasn't here to make a scene. She'd come to do her job, to serve her country. Same as always, but Harwin's words echoed, and the unfairness burned. She thought of her mom, who'd worn a cross every day, even when co-workers whispered behind her back. Karoline's eyes sharpened, locking on the smudged ink. She wasn't loud or flashy, but she wasn't invisible either. Sarah shifted at her desk, her fingers twitching over a file. She'd seen Harwin fine a man for a rosary last year. No explanation given. James, still by the door, caught her eye and gave a slight nod, like they both knew what was happening. The man in the freedom cap turned to his neighbor, his voice low but clear. "He's picking on her faith. That's what this is." Karoline's hand rested on her notes, her resolve hardening. She leaned down, her voice barely a whisper. "This isn't over." Harwin banged his gavel, calling the session back to order. The room settled, but the tension lingered. Spectators stole glances at Karoline, some with pity, others with curiosity. She sat straight, her pen still, the smudge on her page growing darker. Her polite question had been a spark, and the room felt it, even if no one said it out loud. Harwin's eyes flicked to her once more, then away, as if she were already forgotten. But Karoline's fingers brushed her cross again, and she knew she'd just started something. Karoline Leavitt sat alone in her small White House office, the clock ticking past 9 p.m. A single desk lamp cast a warm glow over a stack of case files, their edges worn from hours of review. A cold coffee mug sat untouched, its steam long gone. Karoline's navy blazer hung on the chair, her silver cross necklace catching the light as she leaned over her laptop. She was supposed to be drafting a report on the religious freedom case, but her fingers hovered over the keys, unmoving. Her mind was still in that courtroom, replaying Judge Harwin's voice, sharp and accusing, calling her necklace disruptive. She opened her notes, scanning lines about the lawsuit, but the words blurred. Instead, she saw Harwin smirk, heard him call her young lady like she was nothing. She started an email to her boss, typing a brief summary of the day's hearing. Halfway through, she stopped, deleted it, and opened a blank document. Her fingers moved quickly now, typing one line today. "I was fined for what I believe in." She stared at the words, her chest tight. It wasn't just the $500, it was the way Harwin had singled her out, ignoring the lawyer's flashy watch, the loud shirts in the crowd. Karoline's eyes drifted to a framed photo on her desk, her mom smiling in a church pew, a cross necklace like hers gleaming. She could almost hear her mom's voice, steady and firm. "Faith doesn't need to shout, but don't let anyone take it from you." Her mom had worn that cross every day, even when co-workers whispered she was too religious for the office. Karoline had been 10, watching her mom brush off the snide comments, head held high. That memory stung now. Harwin's fine cutting like those old whispers. Could she really change anything? Or was she just a 27-year-old staffer, too small to matter? A knock at the door broke her thoughts. Anna Reed, a senior colleague, poked her head in, her coat already on. "You okay after today?" Anna asked, her tone careful. Karoline nodded, then mentioned the cross. The fine. Anna's smile faded. "Look, just focus on work. All right, don't make waves." She left quickly, her footsteps fading down the hall. Karoline sat back, realizing not everyone would stand with her. Anna's words echoed Harwin's dismissal, and the weight of it pressed harder. She thought back to when she was 18, volunteering with her church's youth group, dreaming of defending justice. She'd imagined standing up for what was right, making a difference. Now, as White House press secretary, she worked 14-hour days, her apartment empty most nights, her life a blur of memos and briefings. The pressure to be perfect was relentless, and Harwin's fine felt like a crack in that carefully built armor. Was her dream slipping away? Buried under the weight of moments like today, Karoline reached for the photo, her fingers brushing her mom's face. "You were right, Mom," she said under her breath. "If I don't stand up, who will?" She opened a browser, typing First Amendment case law into the search bar. Her eyes burned from exhaustion, but she kept reading, scrolling through legal texts about religious freedom. She wasn't a lawyer, but she'd learned to dig for truth in her job. If Harwin thought he could silence her, he was wrong. The office was quiet, the hum of the city faint through the window. Karoline's phone sat on the desk, screen dark. She didn't notice it light up with a notification from X. A post tagged with her name, "Young woman challenges judge over cross necklace," the clip of her standing in court, asking Harwin to explain, was spreading fast, already at 1,000 views. Comments poured in, some calling her brave, others accusing her of grandstanding. Karoline kept reading her screen, unaware of the storm building online. She closed her laptop, her hand resting on the cross. She wasn't sure what came next, but she knew one thing: she wasn't backing down. Her phone buzzed again. Another X alert, this one with a video thumbnail of her in the courtroom. Karoline glanced at it, her brow furrowing. She tapped the screen, and her own voice filled the room, calm but firm, asking Harwin why. The view count ticked higher, and her stomach tightened. Whatever this was, it was just beginning. Karoline Leavitt stepped into the Jefferson District Court the next morning, her navy blazer crisp, the small silver cross necklace tucked under her collar. The air was thick, the courtroom packed with more spectators than yesterday. Whispers followed her. People had seen the clip of her fine, now circling online. She took her seat near the back, her legal pad ready, but her stomach churned. She'd barely slept. The X post with her face replaying in her mind. The room buzzed as Judge Charles Harwin settled behind the bench, his gray suit sharp, his expression tighter than before. Harwin banged his gavel, calling the religious freedom case back to order. Lawyers shuffled papers, but Karoline's hand shot up, steady despite her racing pulse. "Your Honor, may I speak?" she asked, citing court protocol. Harwin's eyes narrowed, his jaw twitching. He nodded, expecting an apology. The crowd leaned forward, a few phones already raised. Karoline stood, her voice clear, measured. "The First Amendment protects religious expression. My necklace doesn't disrupt this court." In Church of Lukumi Babaluai versus Hialeah, the Supreme Court ruled against targeting faith. Why am I the only one fined? The room went silent, then erupted in murmurs. Harwin's face reddened, his fingers gripping the gavel. "You're out of line," he stammered, but his voice faltered. Karoline pressed on, calm but firm. "Others wear loud shirts, big jewelry. Why my cross? Your Honor." The question hung, sharp and unanswered. Sarah Thompson, the court clerk, stopped typing, her eyes wide with surprise, a faint smile tugging at her lips. She'd seen Harwin dodge questions before, but not like this. James Wilson, the bailiff, straightened by the door, his nod subtle but clear. He'd watched Harwin target faith symbols too long. A woman in a hijab near the front gripped her friend's hand, her face tight with recognition. She'd faced similar looks for her scarf. Spectators whispered, some nodding, others snapping photos. A man in a plaid jacket, unnoticed, recorded Karoline's words, his thumb already hovering over the X app. The hashtag Crossing Court was about to explode. Harwin slammed his gavel, shouting, order, but his authority wobbled. He tried to pivot, mumbling about courtroom decorum. But the crowd wasn't listening. They were watching Karoline, her quiet stand shifting the room's energy. Karoline sat, her hands steady on her pad, though her heart pounded. She'd crossed a line, challenging a judge in open court. Her job could be at risk. White House staff didn't make headlines like this, but the unfairness of yesterday, the memory of her mom's courage, had pushed her forward. She wasn't just a staffer. She was someone who believed in something bigger. The ink smudge on her notes from yesterday stared back, a reminder of the crack she'd started. Sarah glanced at her phone under the desk. The X clip already at 10,000 views. Comments flooded in. She's right and Harwin's a bully. She tucked the phone away, her fingers trembling. She'd stayed quiet about Harwin's fines for years. But Karoline's words stirred something. James shifted his weight, his eyes on Karoline. He'd seen her type before young. Underestimated, but tough. The crowd kept whispering, a few standing to get a better look. The man in plaid hit post, and the clip spread faster, now tagged with justice for Karoline. Harwin cleared his throat, resuming the case, but his voice lacked its usual bite. He avoided Karoline's corner of the room, his fingers tapping the bench nervously. She felt his glance, quick and wary, like he was sizing her up anew. The spectators settled, but the air felt charged, like a storm was coming. Karoline's pen stayed still, her cross warm against her skin. She'd spoken up, and there was no going back. Harwin thought he'd silenced her, but as he called the next witness, his eyes darted to her again, and she knew he was wrong. Karoline Leavitt sat at her desk in the White House, the late afternoon sun slanting through the window, painting her office in hues of orange. Her phone buzzed relentlessly, each vibration a new X notification. She ignored it at first, trying to focus on a report, her fingers tapping unevenly on the keyboard, but curiosity won. She opened the app, and her breath caught. The clip of her challenging Judge Harwin in court had exploded hundreds of thousands of views, thousands of comments. Some called her a hero, others a religious troublemaker. One post stung. She's just grandstanding for attention. She set the phone down, her hands trembling slightly. The report on her screen blurred as her mind replayed the courtroom. Harwin's smirk, the crowd's whispers. She was supposed to be invisible, a press secretary who stayed out of the spotlight. Now her name was everywhere, and not all of it was good. The door creaked open, and Anna Reed, her colleague, stepped in, her coat slung over her arm. Karoline, you've seen the posts, right? Anna's voice was low, cautious. The higher-ups aren't happy. You're putting the office in a tough spot. Karoline nodded, her throat tight. I didn't mean for this to blow up, she said, her fingers brushing the silver cross at her neck. Anna sighed, her eyes darting away. Just keep your head down, okay? This could get messy. She left, the door clicking shut, leaving Karoline alone with the hum of the air conditioner. Anna's words echoed Judge Harwin's dismissal, and the isolation hit hard. She picked up her phone again, scrolling through the X posts. The hashtag Crossing Court trended, but the attack stood out. She's playing the victim and fire her for disrespecting the court, desperate for guidance. Karoline dialed the White House legal counsel, her voice steady as she explained the fine, the clip, the fallout. The response was curt. We can't get involved. Handle it yourself. The line went dead. and Karoline stared at her phone, the weight of being on her own sinking in. Her email pinged a message from the Jefferson District Court demanding she pay the $500 fine within 48 hours. Or face a summons. Her stomach twisted. This wasn't just about money. It was her career, her reputation, everything she'd worked for. Across town, Sarah Thompson sat on her couch, the TV muted. Her phone opened to the same X-clip. Karoline's voice, calm but firm, played on loop in her mind. Sarah had seen Harwin fine others for crosses, hijabs, even a small Star of David pin. Always with that same smug look. She wanted to speak up, to tell someone what she knew. But fear stopped her. What if she lost her job? She closed the app, her hands unsteady, and paced her living room, the weight of her silence growing. James Wilson, the bailiff, was at a diner with his church friends, his phone on the table. He'd shared the clip with them, his voice low but urgent. She's right about Harwin. He's been doing this for years. His friends nodded, but one cautioned, "Don't get involved. Jim, you've got a pension to think about." James stared at his coffee, his fingers tapping the mug. He wanted to do more, but the risk held him back. He forwarded the clip to another group, then pocketed his phone, his jaw tight. Back at the White House, Karoline's office felt smaller, the walls closing in. A news alert popped up. A small outlet had published a piece: White House staffer provokes judge in courtroom stunt. Her heart sank. She overheard two colleagues in the hall, their voices low. "Anna's right," one said. "Karoline's stirring up trouble. I'm disappointed." Anna had shared her concerns with the team, and now Karoline felt the distance growing, her allies slipping away. She opened her messages, finding a text from her mom. "You did the right thing. Don't give up." The words steadied her, reminding her why she'd spoken up. The cross at her neck felt warm, a tether to her mom's courage, to her own resolve. She wasn't grandstanding, she was standing for something bigger, but the doubt crept in. Had she gone too far? Could she keep her job if this spiraled further? Her phone buzzed again, an ex-post catching her eye. An anonymous account had written, "Karoline Leavitt isn't just some staffer. I know who she really is." No details, just enough to spark curiosity. Comments piled up, speculating wildly. Karoline frowned, her thumb hovering over the screen. Who was this? What did they know? She didn't have time to dwell. A new email appeared, from an unfamiliar address. "Ms. Leavitt, we need to meet. Jefferson Judicial Council." Her pulse quickened. She clicked the message, scanning the formal request for a meeting tomorrow. Was this a chance to clear her name, or a trap to bury her deeper? Karoline Leavitt pushed open the heavy door to a meeting room at the Jefferson Judicial Council's office, the morning light streaming through tall windows. The space was stark, a long wooden table piled with folders, 3 chairs occupied by council members. Linda Carter, 60, sat at the head, her gray blazer sharp, her eyes steady as she gestured for Karoline to sit. Karoline's navy vest felt stiff, her silver cross necklace a quiet weight against her chest. She took a seat, her hands folded, her gaze cautious but firm. The email from last night, summoning her here, had kept her awake, wondering if this was a lifeline or a trap. Linda leaned forward, her voice even. "Ms. Leavitt, we're investigating Judge Charles Harwin for religious bias. We need your account." Karoline nodded, her pulse quickening. Before she could speak, the door opened, and Sarah Thompson, the court clerk, stepped in. Her usual timid posture gone, she carried a thick folder, her knuckles white around it. James Wilson, the bailiff, followed, his uniform crisp, his face set. Karoline's eyes widened. She hadn't expected them. Linda motioned for them to sit, and the room felt smaller. The air charged. Sarah spoke first, her voice low but clear. I've documented Harwin's finds for 2 years, crosses, hijabs, Buddhist beads. He never touched loud shirts or flashy watches. She slid the folder across the table, its pages marked with dates and names. James cleared his throat, his hands clasped tight. I saw him berate a guy for a kippah last spring, told him to leave his religion at home. But a lawyer with a slogan tie nothing. Karoline listened, her surprise shifting to hope. She wasn't alone in this fight. Linda turned to her. Your turn, Ms. Leavitt. Karoline straightened, recounting the $500 fine, Harwin's dismissal of her question, and her courtroom challenge, citing the First Amendment in the Lukumi case. Her voice stayed steady, though her hands gripped the chair. She felt the counsel's eyes on her, Linda's pen scratching notes. Outside, a small crowd of reporters gathered, their cameras glinting in the sun. The X-clip had drawn them. The hashtag #CrossInCourt, now a national story. Linda set her pen down, her gaze piercing. There's something you should know. Sarah faced consequences for questioning Harwin's finds. Sarah looked down, her cheeks flushing. He threatened to fire me last year, she said softly. I started keeping records after that. Karoline's jaw tightened. Sarah, who seemed so quiet, had been building a case in secret, risking her job. Linda continued. We're holding a public hearing. We want you as the main witness. Karoline, you'd face Harwin directly. It's not easy, public scrutiny, media pressure. Are you in? The question landed like a stone. Karoline's mind raced. Testifying could expose Harwin, change the system, but it could also tank her career. The X-attacks calling her a publicity hound flashed through her head. She glanced at Sarah, whose eyes were steady now, and James, who gave a small nod. They'd stepped up, despite their own fears. Her fingers brushed her cross, her mom's words echoing, Don't let anyone take your faith. This wasn't just about her, it was about everyone Harwin had silenced. Sarah leaned closer, her voice a whisper. I stayed quiet too long. Don't be like me. The words hit hard, and Karoline felt a spark of resolve. She looked at Linda. I'll do it. I'll testify. Linda nodded, a faint smile breaking her stern facade. Good. We'll prepare you for tomorrow. Karoline stood, her legs steady despite the weight of her decision. The council member shook her hand, and Sarah squeezed her arm. A silent thank you as Karoline walked to the door. Her phone buzzed. She glanced down an X post from President Trump. Karoline Leavitt is America's pride. The notification had thousands of likes, comments flooding in. She slipped the phone into her pocket, her breath catching. The reporters outside turned, spotting her through the glass. Cameras clicked. Voices shouted questions. Karoline kept her head high, her cross glinting in the sunlight. She'd agreed to testify. But as she stepped into the morning air, she knew she was walking into a firestorm. Karoline Leavitt sat in the front row of the Jefferson District Court's main hall, her navy blazer pressed, her silver cross necklace catching the harsh fluorescent lights. The room was packed, every bench filled, the air taut with anticipation. A week had passed since her meeting with the Judicial Council, and now the public hearing loomed. Cameras lined the back, their red lights blinking, streaming live to millions on X. Across from her, Judge Charles Harwin sat rigid in a gray suit, his hands clasped tightly, his face a mask of forced calm. Karoline's stomach knotted, but she kept her eyes forward. Ready, Linda Carter, chair of the Judicial Council, stood at the podium, her voice cutting through the murmurs. We're here to address allegations of bias against Judge Harwin. She held up a folder, her tone steady. Evidence includes emails mocking overzealous believers and records of 15 fines for religious symbols over 3 years. The crowd stirred, a few spectators whispering. Linda called Karoline to the witness stand. Karoline rose, her steps measured. Ignoring the cameras, she took her place, her hands steady on the rail, though her pulse raced. Linda nodded. Ms. Leavitt, tell us what happened. Karoline recounted the $500 fine, her voice clear, detailing Harwin's dismissal of her question and his focus on her cross while ignoring louder attire. She looked directly at Harwin. Why did you target my faith? Your honor. But let others slide. Harwin shifted, his jaw tightening. I was maintaining neutrality, he said, his voice thin. The courtroom requires order. His words sounded hollow, and the crowd's murmurs grew louder. Sarah Thompson, the clerk, stood next, sliding a worn notebook across the table. These are my records, she said, her voice firm despite a slight tremor. Harwin fined crosses, hijabs, prayer beads, never secular items. James Wilson, the bailiff, added, I saw him scold a woman for a hijab last year. But a lawyer in a slogan shirt walked free. The room buzzed, spectators nodding. A woman in her 60s dabbed her eyes, her own cross necklace visible. Linda's gaze bore into Harwin, who looked down, his fingers tapping nervously. Karoline felt the crowd's energy, their silent support fueling her. She thought of her mom, of the ex-posts showing crosses and hijabs under Crossing Court. This was bigger than her fine. It was about everyone Harwin had wronged. Linda turned to her, her voice low. Ms. Leavitt, you can step back. No one will force you to continue. The offer was a way out, a chance to save her career from the ex-attacks calling her a troublemaker. Karoline's hand brushed her cross, and she shook her head. I can't let others face what I did, she said. I'm staying. The crowd erupted in applause, the sound rolling through the hall. Harwin's head dropped, his hands clenching. Linda raised a hand for silence, announcing a recess. As Karoline stepped down, a reporter shouted, Judge Harwin, will you apologize to Ms. Leavitt? Harwin stood abruptly, his face flushed, and strode out, his shoes echoing on the floor. Spectators whispered, some shaking their heads, others typing furiously on their phones. The X-live stream spiked, comments flooding, she's unstoppable and Harwin's done. Karoline returned to her seat, her legs shaky but her resolve firm. Sarah leaned over, her eyes bright. You did it, she whispered. James gave a small smile, his usual stoic demeanor softening. The crowd's applause lingered in Karoline's ears, but she kept her focus on the empty bench where Harwin had sat. She'd made her choice, and it felt right. But the fight wasn't over. As she adjusted her blazer, a young woman approached, her law school badge pinned to her jacket. I'm Emily Chen, she said, her voice earnest. I'm studying law because of people like you. Thank you, Karoline smiled, her first real smile of the day. But her eyes drifted to the door Harwin had exited. Emily's words warmed her, but the battle was still on. Harwin's silence, his quick exit, told her he wasn't ready to concede. She sat back, her cross warm against her skin, bracing for what came next. Karoline Leavitt sat in the packed Jefferson District Court Hall, morning light streaming through high windows, glinting off her silver cross necklace. The benches overflowed with spectators, many wearing crosses, hijabs, or Buddhist beads, their faces tense with expectation. Karoline, in her navy blazer, sat beside Sarah Thompson and James Wilson, her hands folded, her expression calm but resolute. Across the room, Judge Charles Harwin slumped in his chair, his gray suit wrinkled, his eyes sunken. The air crackled, The crowd waiting for the Judicial Council's verdict. Linda Carter stood at the podium, her gray blazer sharp, her voice commanding. After reviewing evidence, we find Judge Harwin in serious violation of the First Amendment. She held up a folder, its pages heavy with proof, emails mocking religious believers, 15 documented fines targeting faith symbols, crosses, hijabs, kippas while ignoring secular violations. The crowd gasped, whispers rippling. Linda's eyes locked on Harwin. "Judge, you will address Ms. Leavitt directly." Harwin stood, his hands trembling, his voice barely steady. "I was wrong to fine you." "Ms. Leavitt," he said, his face flushed. "I regret it." The room erupted, spectators murmuring, some clapping. Karoline met his gaze, her heart steady. She felt relief, pride, but no glee. This wasn't about revenge, it was about fixing a wrong. Sarah Thompson rose suddenly, her notebook in hand. "He threatened to fire me when I questioned his fines," she said, her voice cutting through the noise. "I kept records to protect others." The crowd stirred, a man in a trucker hat muttering, "That's low." James Wilson stood, his bailiff uniform crisp. "I saw him mock a guy for a kippa, but let a lawyer's loud tie slide," he said, his tone firm. Linda raised a hand, silencing the room. "Judge Harwin, you're suspended, effective immediately. You'll undergo First Amendment training and resign. This court will no longer fine religious symbols unless they disrupt proceedings." Cheers broke out, spectators standing, shouting justice. A woman in her 60s, her cross necklace gleaming, clapped fiercely. Cameras flashed, the X live stream spiking with millions watching. Crossing court trending higher. Sarah hugged Karoline, her eyes wet. James grinned, a small crosspin now visible on his lapel. Karoline's chest lightened, her mom's words echoing. "Stand for what's right." She thought of the X posts, people sharing their crosses, hijabs, prayer beads under my freedom. Her stand had shifted something big. She looked at Harwin, hoping he'd learn, not just lose. Linda caught her eye, nodding slightly, her look saying, "You did this." Then, a surprise Anna Reed, Karoline's colleague who distanced herself, stepped forward. "I owe you an apology," Anna said loudly. "I was wrong to doubt you." She turned to the crowd. "I wrote to the White House, told them Karoline's a credit to us." The spectators murmured approval, Karoline's throat tightening at the unexpected support. Linda spoke again, her voice softer. "This investigation was also a test. Ms. Leavitt, we needed someone with courage to expose bias. You're that person." She paused, smiling. "We'd like you to advise on our new religious freedom policies." The crowd roared, applause thundering. Karoline blinked, stunned, her hand brushing her cross. Spectators surged forward, lawyers and locals alike shaking her hand, thanking her. A young woman, Emily Chen, pressed a letter into her palm. "You're why I'm studying law," Emily said, her eyes bright. Harwin slipped out, his head low, his footsteps lost in the noise. Karoline stood amid the crowd, their gratitude washing over her. She tucked Emily's letter into her pocket, her resolve firm. As she left the hall, sunlight hit her cross, warm and bright. Her phone buzzed an X alert. Texas had passed a law protecting religious symbols. Citing her case, she smiled, the weight of her journey settling into something new. The courthouse steps loomed ahead, and she knew her story was spreading far beyond these walls. Karoline Leavitt sat at her desk in her small White House office, the late afternoon sun casting a golden glow across the room. A framed $500 fine notice hung on the wall, its edges crisp behind glass, a quiet trophy from her courtroom stand. Her navy blazer draped over the chair, Her silver cross necklace glinted as she sifted through a stack of letters from across the country. The hum of Washington, D.C. Traffic drifted through the window, a reminder of the world moving on, changed by her actions 3 months ago. She opened a letter from Emily Chen, now a law firm intern fighting for religious freedom. Emily's words were earnest, thanking Karoline for inspiring her career. Karoline smiled, grabbing a pen to reply, "Keep pushing. Emily, you're already making a difference," she wrote, her handwriting steady. She set the letter aside, turning to a notepad for her upcoming speech in Virginia, where 5,000 people would gather. She picked up an old pen, its ink once smudged during that tense court day, and jotted a line, "Faith is freedom, and freedom is worth fighting for." The words felt right, simple, true. Karoline stood, lifting the framed fine to rehang it, her fingers tracing the glass. She wasn't one for trophies, but this was different, a reminder of what one stand could do. Her mom's voice echoed in her mind, urging her to hold fast to her beliefs. She didn't want to be a hero, just someone who showed others they could stand up too. The letters on her desk, from pastors, teachers, and students, proved her ripple had spread. She thought of Sarah Thompson, James Wilson, and the ex-posts of crosses, hijabs, and prayer beads tagged "My Freedom." A knock at the door broke her thoughts. A colleague, Tom Harris, stepped in, holding a newspaper. "You see this?" he asked, handing it over. The headline read, "Florida. Ohio passed laws protecting religious symbols." Inspired by Leavitt case, Karoline's eyes scanned the article, her chest tightening with quiet pride. Tom grinned. "You're changing the country, Karoline." She nodded, setting the paper down. "It's not just me," she said. "It's everyone who spoke up." Her phone buzzed, an ex-post catching her eye. A teacher in a hijab had written, "Thanks to Karoline, I wear my scarf without fear." Another message popped up from Sarah, now a court training advisor. "You reshaped Jefferson." It read. Karoline pictured James, who'd spoken at his church last week, his crosspin gleaming as he shared her story. The movement wasn't hers alone, it belonged to everyone who'd joined in. She touched the old pen, its smudged history a sign that small acts could spark big change. "Mom would be proud," she said softly. Karoline packed her notes for Virginia, her speech ready. At the event, she stepped onto the stage, the crowd's roar washing over her. 5,000 faces looked up, some holding "My Freedom" signs. "I just did what was right," she said, her voice clear. "If you see unfairness, stand up, even if you're alone." Applause thundered, hands raised with photos of crosses, hijabs, kippas. After, Emily Chen approached, her law school badge shining. Karoline handed her the old pen. "Write the next chapter," she said, smiling, back in her office. Karoline resumed work, her desk cluttered with new letters. The framed fine hung steady, a beacon of her journey. She wasn't chasing fame, she wanted to pass the torch. Emily's generation, inspired by her stand, was already stepping up. Her phone lit up with an ex-post. A teenager in a kippah stood outside his school, his caption bold, "My Freedom. Thanks to Ms. Leavitt." Karoline read it, her lips curving. She turned off the phone, her eyes drifting to the window, the city's lights stretching into the distance. The future was wide open, and her spark was still spreading. A small cross, barely seen, hung quietly against her chest. It didn't demand attention, but it changed everything. In a world quick to judge, one voice steady, not loud, can shift what we accept as normal. How many stay silent, not for lack of truth, but for fear of the cost? Sometimes, the smallest stand leaves the deepest mark. If this story stirred something in you, a memory, a question, or just a pause, subscribe to Crossfire Justice for more stories that echo long after they end. Just thank you for watching.